Hey, Jake, we're going to go get started. Can you, Jake, can you see if there's anybody out in the lobby, and if so, ask them to bring them in? Yeah. All right. You guys good? You guys good? I don't have a gavel. That's all I got. Good morning. If we could go ahead and come to order, my apologies. Evan, bring it closer. Okay. There we go. My apologies. We're starting a little bit late, but one of our Senate members, our Majority Leader, Steve Gooch, is driving in. He's a short distance away, and I thought we would wait, but we're going to go ahead and start. So let me call together and convene the Georgia Advancing Forest Innovation in Georgia Study Committee. Good morning. I'm John Kennedy. I have the privilege of representing the 18th District here in Middle Georgia, which includes all of Monroe County, as well as 5 other counties around the district that Andres Villegas says is the most well-represented district in the state. Is that what you say, Andres? Something like that? Yeah, there you are. Something like that, yeah. But it's great to see so many here. Thank you to see all the friends and folks that find forestry important, not only to them, but also for the future of Georgians and also for the state of Georgia as we live in and how we want it to look. I want to thank the partners that are here, and in a moment I'm going to let my Senate colleagues introduce themselves to you. I want to thank the members of the public that are here and the press, and a particular thank you to these folks over here to my right who are from the Georgia Senate Press Office. And they do a fantastic job at serving us and helping us do best what we try to do for the citizens in our district and the citizens around the state of Georgia. But this is important, and with technology and some leadership in the Senate, and this being important, we're live streaming this meeting. So I hope there are a lot of folks out there across the state that are watching this and are going to learn more about what we're going to be studying over this meeting plus the next 3 meetings that will follow. Andres, thank you and the Georgia Forestry Association for letting us have our meeting here. I thought it was entirely fitting and proper that we have the first meeting here, and thank you for that. You've got a gavel? Sure. Let's.
Even more fitting and proper.
That's great. I don't know that I'm authorized to use this, but Russ Goodman's going to help me learn how to drive this, right?
Ask him if that lives from Canada.
He might hit me. I don't want to do that. Let me also thank our Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones when I approached him with the idea of having his study committee and him saying, absolutely, this is something that's good for the state of Georgia. And I appreciate his support for this initiative and also him appointing me to chair this committee. I want to briefly allow my study committee members to introduce themselves. We'll come back to Majority Leader Gooch when he gets here. But to my left, and good friend Senator Larry Walker from Houston County. Most of you know him, and his leadership and distinguished family service going back beyond just his generation. Senator Walker, will you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Larry Walker, I represent the 20th Senate District, which is 8 counties south of here across Middle Georgia. I'm really excited about this study committee. We hear a lot that Georgia's the #1 state to do business. We've been named that for 10 years running. I imagine most of the audience has heard that before. But we're the #1 state in forestry. And my district, the 20th District, has a lot of forestry. It's a very important component to our economy. And I'm proud to be supportive of the forestry industry and look forward to this work of this committee where we can explore new markets and new uses for forestry. And it's exciting. I think it's exciting times in the industry. And I've enjoyed very much working with Andres and his leadership with this association and this beautiful office here and everything. And we'll miss him as he goes into the private sector, still in the forestry field, but appreciate his friendship and look forward to working with all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Walker. To his left is Senator and Chairman Frank Ginn from Madison County. Senator Ginn, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. President. Said you know, one of the things I want everybody to look around the room, and it's all about partnerships. For me, yes, I'm a very small timber grower. I had some of Director Lowmore's crews out plowing and doing some things for me yesterday on my farm. I look over here at Larry. Said he's going to be later on our program and talk about what's going on with Jordan wood products and stuff here. And I've toured that facility in the years past. I know I'm a recovering chair in natural resource and environment, and I think that was when the first year that Georgia became the #1 timber industry in the nation. Said and I look at Andres and I think I'm seeing a kind of a flip flop here, because I think there's going to be some role reversal coming. But at least Andres is going on to bigger and better things, and I'm glad to see Tim being able to take up that role there. But it's great to be with everybody this morning. Look around at the partnerships, and we can't do this by ourselves. We got to work with our partners to make things happen. And good to be here with you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairman Ginn. I appreciate that. Thank you for your service. To my right, another chairman of our Senate Ag, Russ Goodman. I think many of y'all know Russ, and I want to thank him. He gets the Drove the Furthest to This Meeting award. I did a little map quest on it, and you beat Gooch, who is from Dahlonega. Chairman Ginn, you drove a pretty good piece also, but I did a little map questing, and Russ, you get the award. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your leadership. I know forestry is in your blood generationally with you and your wife's family, and so thank you. I'm glad you're on this, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Well, I want to just start off, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pro Tem, and thank you for heading this meeting up and this initiative. For y'all that don't know me, Russ Goodman, and I live between Valdosta and Waycross in a little farming community called Cogdale. I grew up in a farming family. Met my wife in the AGR parking lot at the University of Georgia the second day I moved to Athens, and we ended up dating the whole way through and got married. And she comes from sort of a pioneering forestry family. Her great-grandfather was good friends with Charles Hurdy. And anyway, his name was A.K. Sessoms, and he did a lot. He started helped start the TPO, which became the Georgia Forestry Commission. Went to France in 1914 and brought back the first Freinite steam turpentine steel. Dr. Hurdy did a lot of his work in Cogdale, where he developed the process by which pine pulp is made into paper. I graduated from the University of Georgia on a Saturday. The following Monday, I was in Stockton, Georgia. It was 26 degrees outside, and we were running 12 tree planting tractors. I've left the house this morning and turned left, and I looked over there. There's 3 skidders with Savannah plows hooked to them and 12 tree planting tractors. So I've probably planted about 250,000 acres of pine trees in my life. And I live in the #1 timber growing county in the state. And so I know very well forestry has put many a meal on my table. I know how important it is to the state. I know how important it is to everybody in this room here that's assembled here today, and I thank you for being here. One of the things that concerns me, and Jake Matthews said this in my office last session as we were talking about the forestry industry, and he said we need another Charles Hurdy moment in the forestry industry. When you look at the fact that we're growing 50% more trees than we're utilizing, we have to create markets. And when you look at the 144,000 Georgians that are employed in our industry, and you look at how important it is to the tax digest and our rural school systems and everything else, we've got to create another Charles Hurdy moment, and we've got to build markets. And I'm just thankful to you, Mr. Pro Tem, for this and for this meeting. And I really hope for everybody in this room, from my family and everybody that makes a living in the forestry industry across the state, that something really good comes out of this for our industry. So thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Goodman. And finally, but we saved the best for last, Senator Sonia Halpern, who's from East Point, represents the district southwest of Atlanta, and does a great job for her constituents. And I'm really delighted that she is on this committee and will be asking good questions and helping us formulate policy going forward. So, Senator Halpern, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to be here with everybody. As you heard, I am Senator Sonia Halpern. District 39 is a Metro Atlanta district. And I have been in the state of Georgia, actually, Saturday made 26 years. So I've been here a very long time. And you might wonder, why am I on this committee? I'm in the metro area, but I will tell you something. And you've already heard it from all of my colleagues. This is a really important industry, and I am thrilled to be on this committee. Just a little personal story. My parents both grew up in Mississippi. My mom grew up in a small farm in Carriere, Mississippi, where the biggest town was Picayune next to it. But my grandfather spent most of his career working at the paper mill in Bogalusa, Louisiana. So I don't know a whole lot about the industry. I'm looking forward to really learning, but I do have a connection, and I recognize that we've got to create new markets and make sure that we continue to keep this as a thriving, sustainable industry, because it is important to not just us as a state in terms of economic development, but really in terms of the lives of people who are employed by and work, and like you said, the tax digest and all of that. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Senator. And just making his stage entry moment, our majority leader is here. His timing is perfect. Come on up. We just figured out who's buying lunch today, folks.
I drove the farther, so I could be late.
No, actually, no, we already talked about that.
Rex, north of Atlanta.
We'll give you credit. Russ says we were going down the list, and seriously, your time is great. This is our majority leader, Steve Gooch from Dahlonega, has done a lot in public service from being a Soule County Commissioner, so he's dealt with ag issues across the board, as well as a lot of other things in his many years of service. So, Majority Leader, thank you for being here. You introduce yourself to the crowd, please.
Oh, well, you did a good job already. This is
Don't
Lucky
pull it too
Wireless.
close,
Right?
they said it.
So up in my district, North Georgia, I represent Dawson, Lumpkin, White, Union, Fannin, Gilmer, and Pickens. We used to cut a lot of trees. U.S. Forest Service used to do a lot of clear cutting. We don't do that anymore. I miss those days, because when I was a county commissioner, we received a lot of tax revenues off of that, all that timber that was cut. So thank you all for what you do, and I look forward to serving on this committee and learning more about your issues and your concerns, and see how the great Senate of the great state of Georgia can help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I want to give us a little bit of a roadmap as we begin our meeting today, and as we hear from some folks that are going to speak to us that are very knowledgeable in this industry, and talk about how I expect us to walk this path together for the next 3 meetings that we'll have coming up. And it really begins with thinking about how Georgia so very proudly stands at the forefront of our nation's forestry industry. I don't need to tell the people in this room that, but for the folks that are listening and then are going to be following our committee meetings, we are proud that Georgia leads both production and cultivation of timber and forest products. Countless families, as you've heard from these introductions, as well as so many across the state, rely on forestry and forest lands investments. You know, the industry not only sustains those daily lives, but also supports the dreams of homeownership, of educating their children, of retirement security, and also giving folks a very good, comfortable standard of living. In December of 2023, I had the privilege of joining a delegation from Georgia that was an economic development mission to France to witness innovative ways to use wood products firsthand. Andre put that together and selected several folks to go on that trip, and thank you, Andres, for giving me that invitation, which really planted the seeds for kind of, along with others, of what brings us here today for this study commission. The mission featured a tour of a one-of-a-kind sustainable aviation fuel conversion plant located in Bordeaux, France. So sustainable aviation fuel. We probably all know, but I'll shorten that for purposes of today to SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. And that plant is designed and is currently functioning to convert wood-based products into fuel that actually goes into jet airplanes. Sounds a little fanciful, but it's actually being done as we speak. And that is the seed for what we're going to talk about, of what I hope we will learn in expanding markets for the forestry products in the state of Georgia. Being from a little town of Adrian, Georgia, down right on the county line between Emmanuel and Johnson County, I was shocked about some of these innovations that we learned about, but very delighted to think about what our forestry industry. So we started thinking, how can we be proactive instead of sitting back and just thinking about the problem? So I thought, with agriculture being the number one state in the business, in our state, number one business in our state, and forestry the largest subsidiary of that industry, why don't we do something to try to address the problem? Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta is the busiest airport in the world. We can all think, as most of us fly out of Atlanta, what's the old expression? You can't get there unless you go Delta, right? If you go Delta, you got to go through Atlanta. So that combination of the forestry business basis that we have here, plus the world's busiest airport and the airline industry, as well as all the other industries that rely on aircraft and air flights, really brought together an idea that I, along with the folks that you see before you that serve in the Georgia Senate, who all really ascribe to wanting to be a solutions-based problem solver. And it's the combination of all those ideas that really bring us together. And I thought we would have an opportunity here by having a Senate study committee that hopefully would open the door for Georgia to lead in this issue. Well, specifically, what is that issue? And the issue is driven largely by, and this is what we learned a lot about on our trip, Andres, environmental regulations and airspace regulations being driven out of Europe or from Europe that are going to require, that go full throttle in 2030, that for commercial aircraft to enter European airspace, they will have to have or be burning and utilizing a certain percentage of SAF in their fuel tanks to enter airspace. So there is a tremendous market being generated there by regulation, but also driven by other reasons, but the immediate impact is coming from the regulations. So how do we all come together in Georgia and think together about how do we put together a way that we can lead on this issue and be ready to supply the airlines that are going to have this product? This frontier of forestry products and the use of that is exciting and, quite frankly, a little bit amazing. I was looking at, and I know you guys probably read the Georgia Forestry magazine, and Andres thanks, it's a great publication. But it's not missed on me, and it won't be missed on you. Just in this current issue, there's an article about wood as a battery component. There is another article about using wood components to make bioplastics. So all of these are exciting opportunities that are being discussed of how there are additional markets for your wood products. And quite frankly, I'm excited about hopefully helping us all think about how we develop another one that I hope will be a big one. It may be the moment, Russ, you were talking about that we need. So over the course of the next 3 meetings, we're going to hear from industry and state leaders. The first meeting is where we are today. We're going to hear from forestry industry leaders as a whole and talk about and listen to y'all talk about the challenges of shrinking markets. We're going to hear from some individual landowners and who are going to describe the impacts that these market changes are having on y'all. Our second meeting that will follow this one, our committee will explore the innovations in emerging industries in Georgia and beyond. That meeting was announced to be held September the 13th. Sorry, folks, we're going to have to change that meeting. There's been another study committee meeting that conflicts with, so we'll get the date out and, of course, publicize that so you can attend that meeting. So our second meeting will be sometime near that date, but not September the 13th. Our third meeting, we're going to hear from the business community and state agencies that promote Georgia's economic vitality and around the globe. That is scheduled for October the 29th. And then finally, on November the 7th, we will have our final meeting at the Capitol, which I hope will be a culmination of all of our work and our ideas so that we can produce a report that may, in fact, be an eye toward legislation that might be able to be passed and worked on, I hope, by these committee members and others. We're going to hear from also two of Georgia's premier aviation companies about the emerging international regulatory framework that I just spoke to for just a moment ago, but they will tell you that those regulatory framework and pressures are going to require and necessitate innovation. And that also is going to be the heart of what we're talking about. So it's my hope that the members of this committee and the participants and all of you that are listening will follow along at home and that we'll enjoy this opportunity to work together on this important issue. And we're going to all learn something new together and hopefully chart a path that's going to help all of us, certainly beginning and thinking about our great forestry industry. So with that, I think we're going to get on with our presentation. I would like for folks to try to hold it to 15 minutes. I realize we've got people that could talk all day about the forestry industry, and I appreciate that, but we are going to try to keep to limitations. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Russ. When Russ talks, it's like the old joke about what does it mean when the preacher takes his watch off and puts it on the pulpit? Absolutely nothing. So lastly, before we start, I want to thank my staff who is here, who have spent hours and hours interfacing and communicating with y'all that really bring it all together for us today. My Chief of Staff, Charlie Barrett, in the back. Charlie, I think everybody knows Charlie. Oswald Hernandez, thank you, who runs the office. James Beal, is James here? There he is in the back. Charlie, is that it? That's it for now. All right, no, I think that's it. I would introduce Andres, but I don't need to. Andres, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. We're going to miss you, and GFA is going to miss you, but I know you are staying in this business sector, so thank you for that. We're certainly glad of that. And with that, let me just, rather than talk about your resume, just turn it over to you, and you speak to us.
Surely, certainly. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here today to support this effort. And thank you for picking probably one of the best spots you could have ever picked to have this meeting, which is our office. So we certainly appreciate that. And, of course, in your district, too, as well. So thanks so much for that, and to all the chairs and Madam Vice Chair as well for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. I know oftentimes we've been to study committees where attendance can sometimes be spotty, and this is awesome to have 100% attendance here. So we certainly appreciate that's an indication of how seriously you take forestry in the state of Georgia. So thank you so much. With that, I have way too many slides probably than we can get through today, so I'm going to go through them a little bit quickly. But there might be a little bit of an adjustment thing here on this particular slide. I think part of them are being cut off. But just as a reminder, I think everyone here knows it already, but we are in the #1 forestry state in the nation, and it is a privilege for all of us to be able to say that here. It's also a responsibility. It's a responsibility that we have in the industry to be able to make sure that we're constantly thinking about how we can remain competitive. It's a responsibility in government to make sure that we're well governed, that we're not overregulated or overtaxed, but also thinking about the policies that will help drive us into the future and keep us in that #1 spot. And those cover a lot of different areas, Mr. Chairman. Walker, insurance is something that touches us, of course. Transportation's been high on our list, Leader Gooch. All these things, tort reform, all these things come together for what basically is a $42 billion industry in our state every year to make sure that we're competitive and efficient. We are driven by 3 core principles that really have built us and built our industry in this state, and have built a lot of other industries for that matter too as well. We protect private property rights. When landowners invest in land, they want to make sure that their rights to that property are protected. We have sensible taxes and regulations. We know that people can be taxed and regulated off their land or out of their assets. And finally, really the core magic for us in Georgia is healthy markets. The fact that since the very first day of colonization, that this timber had a market to go to, whether that was building the ships that were part of the armadas for the European navies, or whether that was building Europe after World War II, or whatever it was, our markets here have always been a key driver for the reason why people put trees in the ground. And those trees drive an entire cycle of both ecological and economic benefits for the citizens of our state. We have 4 different programs. I won't go into those, but those are some of the brands that fall under the GFA umbrella. And just to reiterate what makes us number one. Number one in privately owned timberland. So that's land that folks in this room own. A few corporations, but vast majority of it is private, non-industrial individuals, private landowners. We plant more trees than anybody else, we harvest more than anybody else, and we export more than anybody else. So we have got a pole position when it comes to forestry in the United States, and probably, and that's because we're in one of the most productive wood baskets in the world. One more thing too as well. Sometimes people say, well, you're planting pine trees, and that's right. We are the only region in the world that actually plants native trees. The trees that we put in the ground, loblollies, longleaf, slash, are actually native to this region. All over the world, a lot of other forestry is dependent on non-native trees for their industrial production. So it's not only good for our economy, it's good for our ecology too as well. This talks a little bit about our, and this is in your slides, and just to get us back on time, I won't get into it too much, but you can see there that private individuals own over 55% of the timberland in our state, and about half of it is pine and half of it is hardwood. That oftentimes gets people's attention too as well. They always see the sea of green around our state, and everyone thinks, well, all we have are pine trees. No, it's about half and half, and we actually are blessed to have 2 of the largest hardwood sawmills in the country here in Georgia too as well. So it's a very robust industry, very diversified. 2 million truckloads of wood move on Georgia's roads every year. You might say, well, are we going to run out of trees? And the answer is no, because we grow 1 truckload every 15 seconds. So in 1 minute, we've grown 4 truckloads of wood. It's actually a little bit of a problem. We're growing too much. Back to some of the points that were made earlier today, and that's why markets, once again, are so critical for us. We have about 205 manufacturing facilities, primary facilities, and 1,100 secondary facilities in the state that are producing about 5,000 different forest products that people consume every single day. And then that's part of the circular economy. One of the great things that we're thinking about wood products today more than we ever did before, and this is definitely a part of sustainable aviation fuel, it's part of a carbon economy, a way to take carbon from the air and keep cycling through our economy versus the carbon that's coming out of the ground and that's been locked up for millennia in the form of oil and other fossil fuels. So this is obviously the direction that the world's economies are going to, that the world's biggest industries and companies are going to, with a lot of pledges for net zero. Like I mentioned, we plant 200 to 300 million trees a year. Russ, you've been part of that, so thanks for pointing that out. But this is important. The United States only plants about 1.2 billion trees a year. So Georgia makes up a huge chunk of that just in this one state. That's enough air on an annual basis for 400 to 600 million people to breathe clean air. That's the entire population of our country that's breathing air because of the trees that we plant in one single state. So it's an incredible statistic, and it's an incredible part of how we sustain life in Georgia, not only people, but also wildlife and a bunch of other stuff through habitat, clean air, clean water. Obviously, there's a lot of carbon benefits, and I won't go through this, but we basically are offsetting all of the miles driven in Metro Atlanta every year through the trees that we plant. So that's a one-to-one offset through the work of our forests in the state of Georgia, and obviously we're providing a lot of critical habitat for both recreational species, deer, turkey, quail, as well as non-recreational species. And once again, back to that connection to Atlanta, basically all of North Georgia's water that's going into Athens, Atlanta, metro areas is coming through forests. Most of the water in the southern parts of our city and municipal water comes from wells, but in the northern part of the state, it's coming through streams. That water gets to the streams through our forest. And when it's coming through the forest versus paved areas, it actually reduces a tremendous amount of the water treatment costs for our community. So maintaining those forests is really important for the water that our folks need throughout the state. All right, so what are the threats that we're facing? Well, according to a study that came out in 2011, I believe, we were set to lose 11 to 23 million acres of forest across the southern states. That's basically all of Georgia's forest if we go up to the 23 million number. You know, we have about 24 million, total million acres of forest in the state of Georgia. So think about, and this is to paving it. This isn't to agriculture or other uses. This is actually to cutting it down and putting concrete there. So if you could think about the landscape that we enjoy today actually being covered completely in concrete, kind of like a Star Wars movie or something, you know, completely urbanized, that's what that number means. And it's a scary number. That was before COVID, and everybody from California and New York and everywhere else wanted to come to our state to buy their little piece of paradise, right? And so that's probably, that number might be even, and not just our state, but obviously South Carolina and some of the other southern states too as well. So what does that really look like? Well, they're not, you know, across the southern states, that doesn't mean that we're gonna pave over, those 23 million acres are gonna happen everywhere. Most of it's gonna be in states that have a coastal area, so between, you know, that area of, say, Cocoa Beach all the way up to Myrtle Beach area. And then the second hot spot is around DC, and then obviously you can see North Georgia being the area that's going to change the most. In other words, where is the forest cover being lost to urbanization? It's not in the middle of Mississippi. It's not in the middle of Alabama. It's not in the middle of Tennessee. It's in Georgia, on our coast and around North Georgia, and then it's all along the coast, eastern seaboard there. That's where the main forest cover loss is going to happen. And so when folks, you know, tell you that we don't, when, you know, you might hear, hey, you don't cut trees to make sustainable aviation fuel or mass timber buildings or whatever it is, that's not the threat to our forests. We can keep growing those trees, but once we lose the dirt and we pave over, it's gone forever. And so that's what we think about a lot at the Forestry Association and in the forestry community. How can we make the forest landscape all the way to the back end of the mills resilient and economically competitive so you don't have to convert the land to something else? So that's a big driver of what we talk about and why economics are so important to us. So the second number here, and I apologize that this slide is getting cut off a little bit. The second thing that's really important is really over the last about 30 months or so, we've seen an impressive number of mills go out of business. And this is and driven by a lot of things. A lot of our mills in the United States, and Marshall Thomas is going to talk about this some, you know, they're not necessarily newer mills, especially when we're talking about pulp and paper facilities. And so they take a lot of capital to maintain, but they are connected to the global economy. When they were first built, they were probably almost solely supplying the domestic economy. Today, they've got to compete with mills in Brazil, in Chile, in Uruguay, in China, in South Africa. They have to be globally competitive. So when we think about things from a GFA perspective, we're not necessarily worrying about trying to compete with that mill over in Alabama. We're saying, how do we compete with the one in Finland or the one in wherever else it may be in the world, in the planet? And this has partly been driven by the fact that there was an adjustment globally. You know, the U.S. economy, because of all the money that was put into it during COVID, our economy kept going, right? People kept spending a lot of money. They kept consuming a lot of things. There was a run on toilet paper. We don't even need to talk about lumber because you guys ask me about that almost every single day when we're up at the Capitol, right? When's lumber coming down? And it did tremendously, probably about 70, 80%. But the point is that you know, the rest of the world didn't have that. The Europeans, China, they didn't pump trillions of dollars in their economy to keep going. So their consumption actually went down of a lot of things that we provided to them. So that was a market adjustment there. There's a little bit of an oversupply. And then also compounded with the fact that some of our mills may not be the most competitive. But this is a big deal because we only had one, it's not on this map actually, but it's right down in Brunswick, that's gone out of business. But that's, knock on wood, you know, we hope that that'll continue to be the case, but quite frankly, we've been lucky. All of those other mills that are in red there, especially the ones closest to Georgia, were consuming Georgia wood. That timber that was going to those Florida mills, some of that or Alabama or South Carolina or Tennessee, now that's got to come into our state. And all the wood that was in Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, and North Carolina doesn't have a home anymore. And guess where it wants to come? To our mills, depressing prices, creating oversupply and depressing prices for Georgia landowners, which of course, Russ, we've talked about a lot, Chairman Goodman, we've talked about a lot, is a concern for the reasons to invest in timberland. So this is a major driver for where we're at today, and something that policy can actually help us advance, especially when we think about innovative wood products, and Marshall Thomas is going to tell us about that a little bit later today. Other challenges, and this is nothing new. This is just a part of the economy, the U.S. economy, I'd say, but part of the Georgia economy, very much so, especially if you're close to a Hyundai plant or in certain parts of the state where we have this incredible new opportunities for employees or for workforce. But it's a challenge sometimes to find people, even when you're paying pretty good job, pretty good wages. So labor continues to be a challenge. So I'm not going to paint a bleak picture. I want to make sure that we're realistic about where we're at. And I do want to point out the fact that this body, both the House and Senate, the Georgia State Legislature has been extremely supportive of forestry the last few years. Together in 9 years, we've passed 17 pieces of legislation. I want to give a special shout out to Mr. Richard Royal, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee for so many years, who's been a great advisor for us on tax issues. And for those of you in Timberland, sometimes you guys call him too as well, asking for advice in that space. But this is an example of how policy has helped address some of these challenges that we've had. And so in terms of creating a more competitive space. A good example here is you guys helped us end local lumber bans. We had communities that were saying you can't build with lumber. Well, a lot of that was driven by other industries that wanted to use their products instead. So we stopped that. We also allowed folks to start building mass timber buildings up to 18 stories when they're ready to do that. We don't have any of those yet, but there are those in other parts of the state, other parts of the country. The increase in truck weights, we cannot say thank you enough. I've heard it from people in this room on the forestry side that might be the single most valuable and important thing that we've done, that you've done for the forest industry in the past 10, 20 years. So thank you so much for that support there. That was critical. And obviously, Chairman Goodman, you led the fight on that. We don't need to rehash all that because I know that that would take even longer. But thank you for all that support. And thank you to my other Senate, your colleagues in the Senate who gave you a lot of emotional support through that too as well. But anyway, the point is that creates opportunity. Let's think about the strategic advantages that Georgia has, and this is not a pretty slide, but it's just words on paper. But number one, the fact that we plant more trees than any other state in the nation, and most countries around the world, gives us a competitive advantage when the world is moving to a carbon economy. When people aren't asking how much is the dollar per gallon on that SAF, or dollar per ton on whatever product it is, they're saying what's the carbon intensity of that product? And that starts to figure in whether or not they're going to buy it or not. 10, 20 years ago, that's the biggest change. People looked at biofuels and renewable fuels and they said, it costs more money, I'm not going to buy it. Today, that's not what they're saying. They're saying we don't have a choice, back to the policies that are coming out of Europe. We have told our shareholders, we've told the global economy that we're going to go to net zero. They can't ignore the carbon score of the products that they consume. And that's just as important as the dollar that it costs for them to buy it. That's maybe the biggest shift. And when we are already naturally doing a lot on the carbon side by planting all these trees and making all these products that sequester carbon, like the wood in these walls, that puts us in a great position as a state to be able to play a strategic role in this space. Second thing, we talked about our economy is moving to a mobile economy in the state, right? We're building cars, we're building other things that are related to that. Our opportunity to be a part of that journey for the state of Georgia is very real. We've had a lot of companies, Georgia-based companies, if you look at the Georgia Drawdown Program, that have made net zero pledges to eliminate their carbon from their businesses. Our ports and our fuel distribution system, Colonial Pipeline, and our blending system, blending facilities like the one we have here in Macon, close to where I live, are giving us the opportunity to also be globally competitive and move the product throughout the state. There's a few needs. We probably need more blending stations as we think about where fuels could go, but there's an opportunity there. And then lastly, we have more pulp and paper mills than any other state in the nation. These are mills that take wood and deconstruct it down to its molecular basis and then reconstruct it back into things that we can use every day. We have been doing this for over 80 years, maybe 100 years now, and we're pretty good at it. We're really good at it. And so this is something where we need to find new ways to extend the life of those assets, and these new products that we're going to talk about shortly can help us do that. So we were in Finland a little bit earlier this year. A company called Stora Enso has a subsidiary named Cura, And they are making, they're working with the Japanese to make textiles, basically, out of wood. And so we've made rayon at the Rainier Advanced Materials facilities in the past, but these are new products that are probably even more advanced than anything we've ever made in the past. Another company called Metsa is working with H&M and IKEA to make textiles too as well. They had an interesting choice there in their models, but they're, you know, this is the idea probably for investors, you know, that we can take the industrial assets that we have and turn them into things that people buy every day, you know, in the form of clothing and dresses. Their UPM, another huge Finnish company as well, is very invested in the biofuels space, and they're taking resins, tall oils, and turning them into diesel and naphtha, which is just gasoline basically. And so another great example of where people are already at, and this is just part of their journey to replace fossil fuels in the Finnish economy and the European economy. And I landed, I may have missed that one. Stora, once again, is also doing some stuff with heat treatment of lumber, where they're taking chemicals completely out of the process and being able to preserve and make wood termite, fire, and rot resistant by doing some advanced heat treatments as well. We're seeing packaging as well as the things that are going up, so both the chemicals and the packaging, as we mentioned, bioplastics and things like that, being made also by Stora Enso, UPM. I know a lot of our Georgia-based companies have been working on things like this related to that too, graphic packaging, International Paper, RIAM, Rainier Advanced Materials, and others have all done some work in this space too as well. And then, of course, batteries, and this is the lignode, taking lignin from the trees, which is about 40% of a tree, and converting that into the anode component of a battery. And so another example of where they're taking things as well, and they have a joint venture with Volkswagen to advance that work. Neste is a company, another Finnish company that's also looking at multiple different things and doing some of them already. And to prove this, both for large ships, for planes, for cars, and for other types of chemicals, but to prove this, when I landed at the airport in Helsinki, this was the truck that was sitting right next to my plane, and it was refueling the plane next door with sustainable aviation fuel. And so it was a good welcome for me to see that right out of the gate, that these things are real. We're not just talking about it anymore. They're things that we're actually commercially doing in other parts of the world. Now, why is this important for me? Because the U.S. has always followed Europe. North America has always followed. The Europeans go out there, spend a bunch of money, figure out how to do it, build the plants, and then we come after the world. All the pulp mills that were built in the U.S. and started here in Georgia, the Europeans did it first. And then we figured out how to do it bigger and better. And that's exactly what we need to do, what I hope we'll be talking about and you'll be talking about here.
Looks like you've been hacked on your computer screen. Somebody's.
The blueberries?
Blueberries. Did you do that?
I figured he'd like that.
That's pretty good.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, what more welcome could you get than that, you
Are we
know?
gonna turn blueberries into fuel too?
Plenty of sugar,
why
you
not?
can.
Why not? Fuels me.
So, yeah, so a good welcome for us and a good example, and of course the trees in the background there are also illustrative of what we're talking about here. A closed loop, sustainable way of doing business with the resources that you got on your home turf. So we talk about these things under an umbrella called Seedlings to Solutions. When we think about jobs, we've got, you know, we want to be efficient. When we think about mobility, we think we can fit into that space really well. When we think about sustainable sourcing, we're there. When we think about innovative manufacturing and high-tech, high-end jobs, all of these fit. And this is for all of Georgia. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you're getting on a plane in Atlanta, or you're going down into rural Georgia and you want to be in a forest and you want to hunt, or whatever else may be there, or you need that for your water in your local municipality, or you want to be able, or you want to think about, you know, going to engineering school at Georgia Southern or at Georgia Tech or at Georgia and working in innovative manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. These are all things that we can do across our entire state. And once again, that seedling's the solution. The fact that we can plant that many trees every year and do it consistently, because we have the dirt to do it and the markets to do it, means we can do all these things too as well. So a little bit of what that looks like. One example, real examples that are already there, we helped a company called Jamestown that owns Ponce City Market build this building, the 619 Ponce building. Once again, back to that, this is a mass timber building. And it's got Pottery Barn in the first floor, and Sage, a global payroll processor, on the second floor or third floor. But what's cool about this building, all the wood that it took to build this building was grown. We grow it every 16 minutes in the state of Georgia. So you could do 4 of these in an hour if you wanted to, and never run out of wood. So this idea of us being, have a special position to do this extremely well is very much so the case. We've also done some stuff to engage with the public. Senator Halpern, all the folks from your district that might come up to Ponce City Market to see things, they get this opportunity to have lunch or whatever it is, to engage with mass timber and learn about the story of Georgia's forests. And this connects urban with rural, which is one of the hardest things that we have to do. I know it's a challenge in the Senate. It's a challenge every day. That we have a massive thing called Atlanta, and sometimes they don't know what's happening outside the city, right? These types of projects allow us to connect the two in a very real way. People want to, the little kids want to get on this little donut here that's there, the swing, and parents want to touch it, feel it, and scan the QR code, and then they see that building next door, and they're like, I would love to work in a building like this. So it's a great connection there. You can see that 75% reduction in embodied carbon. So we're reducing the carbon footprint of the built environment. That's responsible for about 40% of the world's emissions, the built environment is. And so this is an awesome opportunity. Once again, pole position for Georgia. And then the cool thing about this is that we've already replanted put 50,000 trees on the land that was harvested because we knew exactly where this wood came from. It came from, Jamestown owned the land about 2 hours south of Atlanta. It went to the Albany sawmill that Georgia Pacific owns and sawn into lumber. From there, went to Alabama and got pressed into the mass timber blocks. That's a giant piece of mass timber they're able to cut out of Georgia. And by the way, if you want to take a look at it, you can see it from the side, the layers of wood, how they come together. But and then from there, it came back into Atlanta. That is a circular economy. And how many jobs did we support from the planting the trees, managing them, the fuel that went into the trucks, the harvesting, the jobs at Georgia Pacific and all the restaurants that support all the workers there, and then coming back into downtown Atlanta. An incredible story, and we can do this all over the place, quite frankly. And then on top of that, this building now is eligible for carbon credits that a company could go out and buy. A Delta or an IBM or a Coca-Cola or whoever wants to offset their carbon emissions can buy the carbon credits that are associated with this building, and that's a piece of legislation that you in the Senate and the House passed for us. So what are we really trying to do? We're trying to connect sustainable forestry, the dirt, the acre, with the greater economy. And that's where we win as a state, because we have both. 100 years ago, we were a very rural-based economy. We aren't that anymore. But the state still needs us. That bigger economy that's out there globally still needs forestry, and we're in a great spot to supply that. So when we talk about SAF, we need 3 billion gallons by 2030. We're nowhere close to that. We're drops in the bucket right now. And by 2025, we need 35 billion gallons.
Is that worldwide?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, when we think about, once again, but this point to the fact that our forest sector is a global sector. Right? Our logs and our pulp products, our chemical products go all over the world. So for us, this is incredible. Obviously, we've got Atlanta. That will be a big part of this, being the busiest airport in the world, right? So, but what I like about this a lot, and this is where you guys, where the Senate and the House, as elected officials, the responsibility on your shoulders. The decisions today will affect people that aren't even born yet, right? And so that's the incredible thing that we get to think about, is that we can, if we get it right, there's going to be a lot of people that benefit from this, both on the ecological perspective and the economic perspective. Back to the Charles Hurdy moment, right? And so here you can see a little bit of who's manufacturing sustainable aviation fuel today. This is from a U.S. DOE, Department of Energy report that was published last year, so it doesn't show a few of them, but you will see Georgia's already on the map with LanzaJet. But as you look across this, we're pretty far away from 3 billion gallons. 120 million. There's a lot of numbers out there, but different ones, and not all of these are from forest resources. Some of these are from other agricultural crops, and we don't necessarily discriminate it. We think you have to. It's an all inclusive, all of the above kind of solution set there. But obviously in Georgia, really darn good at growing trees, right? Nebraska's going to do it with corn, right? So just use your competitive advantage. And then I won't get into these, but there are at the state level, here's examples of 5 different states that have put in different types of incentives. Some of them are focused on production, so the people who are growing the feedstocks. Some of them are focused on consumption. Some of them are focused on greenhouse gas reductions. All of those are complicated in their own way, and they have their own nuances. But the point is, other states are moving into this space. They're trying to make sure that they get there. The second component is on the federal side. All this is in your materials, and I know you probably have a million questions, but I would love for you to hear from Marshall because he's got some great perspectives on this. And there's also federal stuff that's out there too as well. And as we all know, elections can change if that's will exist into the future. But the point is that everybody's kind of pointing in their direction here. And then once again, even without these things, there's still that demand that's being created by people that we don't elect in Europe, and shareholders that are saying you've got to do this. So there's enough drivers out there to say this is real. And as we think about, when I think about the state side, I think about let's be competitive, and I'm sure you're probably thinking the same. And then when I think about the federal side, I say let's be complementary. Let's make sure that we're not stacking too much on top of what's already there, but coming in and filling in gaps that might not be there to help accelerate and position us to be really well. But this is just one product of many, and you're going to hear from experts throughout this process that will be there to open our mind beyond sustainable aviation fuels to all of those other products that we mentioned too as well, to kind of paint a picture of what we need, because we are a big industry and we're not a single product industry either. When we take timber, we make lumber out of it, we have a pile of chips that have to go somewhere. Those chips usually go to pulp mills. Those pulp mills are creating other products too as well, so it's an entire value chain that's linked together. Almost none of these industries can stand alone on their own. They really need each other to be successful. So with that, I'll relinquish the microphone. And,
Andres, thank you. Before you step aside though, do any committee members, Majority Leader Gooch, have any questions?
Thank you. I may have missed this. Is there already a mandate at the federal level, or do you anticipate one in the next 10 to 20 years for this? I know you talked about the European blend, but is that something you anticipate will be required for domestic flights?
I don't think in the U.S. We'll have that. You might see maybe some states you might see California move in that direction. But right now I don't anticipate that. But of course, once again, it just depends on who gets elected.
That's the Trend Challenge, that's U.S. DOE law administration. So it's not regulation, but that is their ambition, right? That's a U.S. number, not a global number. So just to
Chairman Walker.
Andres, on mass timber, appears that maybe that's gaining some traction nationwide. I think I've read in the last week or so that a developer is going to build a really kind of a mass timber skyscraper. It's going to be the tallest in the country. Did you see that?
Yes, sir. Was that the one up in Wisconsin somewhere? Yes, sir. And we've actually taken a couple of legislators up to see the one in Milwaukee, which is the current tallest one, in particular to talk about insurance issues. And so with that developer there, because they are new and the technology's hasn't been out there as much, getting the underwriters to not penalize it, over penalize it, because insurance for those buildings can be 2 or 3 times what a normal building would be, even though they're actually safer. But because there haven't been any failures, the way that the actuarial tables are built is a challenge because there's not enough data there to fill them. Yes, sir.
I think the insurance industry will catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's a competitive industry, and the first person to figure out, that it is safe and safer, will, capture that market, and there's an incentive for them to.
Yes, sir.
So I think the industry will catch up.
And
What's going on?
There's a company called Harbor Bay that wants to build a 23-story building in Buckhead. They've already got the land. It's one of the last pieces of open land in Buckhead. It'll be 6 stories, I think, of a concrete pedestal, and then whatever the 18 stories of mass timber above it.
Great. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Gann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You always gotta look out for where your competition is, so we start talking about biofuels and things there and what we're doing on the SAF. What happens if the peanut folks said, hey, well, you know, we got a lot of peanuts in Georgia and we want, you know, I know that's a product that, I like smelling the peanuts when I go to a ball game or when a UGA bus used to pull up there on campus, 30 years ago, they were burning peanut oil for diesel fuel.
Yes, sir.
So what's our biggest competition in a biofuel, to compete with the forestry products?
Yeah, so if we go back to that idea of a carbon intensity score, that's what the companies are looking at. So let's say that the carbon intensity score for, which is the reduction in carbon of it. So when we use wood for producing SAF, you're getting about a 75 to 80% reduction, depending on what technologies you're using. When you're using almost everything else, you're in the 40 to 50% range, and some of them are only 20% with some of the agricultural crops. So the beauty of the carbon intensity, so in other words, if you wanted to get a gallon, mix sustainable aviation fuel or this biofuel with traditional, you could use a blend that's less of sustainable aviation fuel made from wood to get it to zero, net out to zero, versus if you were to go with another product, you might have to use 2, 3, 4 times as much fuel to get it to zero, if that makes sense. So it's the ability to blend it and bring down the total carbon there, because our carbon intensity is so much reduced. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you. Any questions? Chairman Goodman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to add one thing, Andres, and, you know, we have a lot of people, I've had several people call me that tell me they'll be watching online that, you know, they maybe not understand what we do, but I think it's worth mentioning. I believe you said for every tree we cut, we plant 7 back. Is that correct?
Yeah, roughly that number, yes, sir.
Right, so that's something for people that have anxiety about cutting pine trees for energy. That's something that's good to know, I think, for the public. And if I get ahead on you on this question, I apologize, but you and I have talked about this a lot. And I know that in the legislature, there's been I guess a lot of, it's getting harder with tax credits, right? But at least for us, where we grow trees at, we talk about rate of return. The tangible rate of return where I live at of growing trees is about 1.5%. That's the tangible rate of return on the value of the asset, right? You've got the appreciation in the land that's actually greater than the tangible rate of return, but you can't pay the light bill with appreciation, right? And I think that's something that's good to know as well when you look at these rural communities. And you had told me before that if we make this a reality, it could be an $80 billion industry.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? In the state of Georgia. So you think about the jobs that creates and the value that brings these rural economies. As we move forward with this, I think any kind of tax credit, you have to look at, you know, I'm okay with spending 25 cents if I'm gonna make $1. You know what I mean? So I think that we need to look at that as we move forward as well, as what this could be to the state in terms of economic impact.
That's a good point. The $80 billion number came from Georgia Tech, and so they're usually good with numbers. And they said that was a conservative number too as well. So when you think about forestry today being $42 billion and being the largest part of our ag sector, and the potential of just SAF being an $80 billion industry for us, we're talking about a lot of economic activity.
Okay, great. Andres, thank you for that presentation. All right. Mr. Thomas, Marshall Thomas, thank you for being here. President of F&W Forestry Services, long distinguished career in this business sector and with forestry. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to turn it over to you. And if you want to introduce yourself further, that's fine. But otherwise, we are looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you for being here.
I'll just jump on in, and I will give a little bit of background. F&W started in Albany, Georgia back in the early 60s, but we now have operations all over the United States, Uruguay, Brazil, United Kingdom, France. So the reason I give that little bit of additional background is I've been around the world a little bit and seen forestry in other places. So I'm going to give a few comments about what that means for us. All right, I'm going to talk about the opportunity, and I'm going to take a little bit different perspective. Surely I care about our industry, and we do need new markets, but I think the opportunity here for the state of Georgia is a lot bigger. We just happen to have the resource that we need for the state to take advantage of it and create one heck of an industry that'll benefit everybody in the state, and for that matter in the world, because this resource that we have can be a really important part about this transition that we're trying to do from a petroleum, coal-based economy to a green economy. So I think we got the resource to enable this state to do something far greater than just help out us tree growers. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm going to talk a bit about the resource, the supply chain, and what I see as the risk in what we're doing, the challenges, and then I'm going to come back to the opportunity. I hope I can keep this kind of brief. I know we're supposed to be about 15 minutes. I'm going to tell you every one of these slides could have 20 or 30 or maybe a whole day. There's a lot of material backing this up. But here's our opportunity. I've already said it a little bit. We've got this green raw material. I'll talk about that when I get to the environmental side. It's plentiful, it's low cost if you look at it on an international basis. We've already said we're growing way more than we're consuming, and we've already got the network in place to get all this wood from where we're growing it to a mill. And we don't care what that mill is, it can make anything, any of these green things or our current products. Going back to what my final bullet point there is, what I see as the real opportunity. We can add jobs, tax base, and position Georgia as a leader in the green economy transition, which I think is really, really big. Once again, Europe's way ahead of us on this. I forgot to mention we got operations in France. I've been over there a lot too. They are really into this transition from petroleum coal to other products. And to the extent that they are showing us where we're going to go, it's something that I think we need to pay attention to, and I'm going to say it again, Georgia is uniquely positioned to do that. Okay, we've talked about the oversupply of trees. Let me talk to you about why we have an oversupply of trees. We've learned how to grow trees. We've got advanced silviculture in this country. Silviculture is like agriculture, but silva is Latin for tree or forest. We've got advanced genetics. We don't really use much GMO yet. We're on about the third or fourth generation of tree breeding. But we've got advanced genetics, and our trees will grow a lot faster than the trees we planted 30 or 40 years ago. We've got a really favorable climate, about a 270-day growing season. We've got fast-growing tree species. I'll hit this several times during my remarks, but Andres already said it. We grow native trees for our commercial forest crop. We're one of the few places in the world, the United States, that does that. If you go down to South America, they grow eucalyptus or radiata pine. Eucalyptus is from Australia. They plant it on native grasslands. They're converting native grasslands, a valid ecosystem in and of itself, to trees that are from Australia. Or they're planting radiata pine, that's a tree from California, on what was a native forest. That happens over on the west side of South America. Here we use the original trees that grow here. Our white-tailed deer, a bobwhite quail, it doesn't know whether it's in an old forest from 500 years ago or a forest we're growing today. We don't get enough credit for that. Government policy has affected our oversupply. The CRP converted about 600,000 acres of cultivated field to trees. That's about 8% of our current 7.2 million acres, and some of the fastest growing, because you think about it, you don't have any competition in an old field, and you've got the residual fertilizer. I don't get into this a lot, but government policy, you all know the story about the housing boom and subsequent collapse. When they stopped cutting trees in 2,000 acres, our trees kept growing. So we got a bunch of trees out there now, ready for somebody to come in and use. If you look at delivered prices of round wood for fiber, not for saw timber, but for fiber, and it's true of saw timber too, but I'm focused mostly on the fiber stuff we'll make the chemical things, chemical products out of. We are a very competitive producer. So if industry looks all over the world about where they want to go, and they start looking at Georgia, what they're going to see is we're about probably middle of the world in terms of being able to deliver that roundwood to them in terms of getting it from the woods to the mill, delivered to the gate. We're a little bit cheaper than most of the northern hemisphere, a little more expensive than most of the southern hemisphere, although I think there's a few accounting tricks going on with some of those southern hemisphere guys. So The reality may be we're more competitive than it even appears. And I'm going to show you in a minute that the pulp and paper industry has matured and is starting to decline in this country, which means we should see decreasing demand from them, so even more of these trees that we're growing will be available for use. I'm also going to show you a slide that Senator Goodman's already talked about. Our prices are way down. They've been going down for a while, and that's bad for us growers. But once again, we're here about the opportunity, and the opportunity for the state is to attract all this industry that's looking for a place to come and make these green products. Okay, I've got two charts here. You heard about the Hurdy moment. That's what started this first chart. On the left-hand side, that's the United States pulp and paper production. You can see I've got data there back to about 1899, and then I got a gap there in the middle. That's that straight line I just interpolated. But you can see where we started producing pulp in the United States, Europeans coming over, as Andres mentioned, with the pulping knowledge from Europe and starting to build pulp mills here. They had a heck of a time building them in the South because of the resin in our pine trees. Charles Hurdy figured out how to do it. That was in 1930. You can see that's that flat plot spot on that graph. And all of a sudden, everybody in the country started heading south and building paper mills. Now, this is U.S. pulp and paper production on the left-hand side. You can see how it boomed, peaked in, what's that, about the late 1990s, early 2000s, and has been declining ever since then. Does my arrow show up there? My mouse? No, it doesn't, so I'll have to walk you through this. All right, the top graph there, that's production in millions of tons, years on the bottom. You see it peaked about 2000. There's two key lines on there. The second line from the top, kind of purple, that's packaging. So that's Amazon and others. As you can see, it's doing pretty well, still growing. The other line down there, it's a red line, kind of a straight line that's growing. Here, I can point at it, right here. That line. That's sanitary products, toilet paper, household items. That's continuing to grow. Fortunately for us, that's mostly what we make in the South. So if you shift to the right-hand side, the right-hand graph there, that shows the same information from 2008 to 2024 for the whole country, cumulative, but the bottom part of that dark green, is the South. You can see we're declining in the South, but certainly not as precipitously as the entire country. So what's going on with pulp and paper? It started booming in the early 1900s, took off. That was the big part of what allowed the South to recover from the Great Depression. It brought jobs to the rural economies, but we built all those mills in the South from when Hurdy discovered how to do it until about 1984. Last mill in the South was built in 1984. So it's an aging industry, no new mills. The pulp and paper industry worldwide is still expanding. It's in Asia, South America, and the Scandinavian countries, but our country, due largely to government policy and the environmental restrictions on building pulp and paper mills, has really made a choice that we're not going to continue to grow that industry. We're letting other parts of the world take it from us. South America and Asia, who knows how they do it down there. They're state-of-the-art mills. They want them. We don't want them here. But the Scandinavian countries are doing it. Those are developed Western countries. They're expanding their market share of the pulp and paper business. We've chosen not to. I'm emphasizing that because I'm going to come back in a minute. Key to us, though, is if we continue with current policy and current trends, demand's going down, we're going to have even more wood to supply to new industries. Okay, on the solid wood side, it's a little bit of a happier story. I've got data here back to 1865. A lot of people don't know it, but the first big boom in lumber production in the South was about 1910 when we produced 15 billion board feet. It was a massive industry all over the country. We didn't hit that level again until the 1990s. Really an interesting story when you think about it. That's in part because the boom in the 18 and early 1900s was cut and get out boom. It was a mining. They came in and cut all the trees down, they'd move on to the next spot, and nobody managed the trees, nobody cared what happened to the land. And once they cut all the material, that's why the industry went down starting about 1925, 1930. They ran out of trees and had to move out. And then obviously the little trees grew back, pulp and paper moved in. You saw that on that previous graph. And then as the trees got bigger, the saw timber lumber industry moved back into the South. It's a pretty healthy industry. If you look at it, our growth curve starting in the 80s has been pretty steep, except of course for this unfortunate little blip right there, which is 2008. Remember I told you we accumulated a lot of wood during those years? We weren't cutting it and it was growing. Okay, all that's had a terrible impact on growers in terms of prices. Here I've got price data back to 1976 to the present. That's on the x-axis. On the y-axis is dollars per ton. The green line at the top is saw timber. The blue line is small saw timber, and the red line is pulpwood. As you can see, we're getting the lowest prices that we've gotten since 1976. By the way, this is in real terms, inflation-adjusted terms. So this is buying power of the dollars. So, you know, one way I like to explain this to people is that for every ton of saw timber you sell today, you can buy $25 worth of today's goods. And if we got the same price we'd gotten back in 1997, you could buy $85 worth of today's goods. This has been a pretty catastrophic thing for growers. The only way we've made it is the same way agricultural folks have made it. We've driven down the cost of production. Now, this is bad for growers, good for manufacturers, and I think it illustrates the supply-demand issues that we have in this state. And keep in mind, we're not making a lot of money, Senator Goodman, but we're making a little bit at it. If we can get those prices up a little bit, we can make more, and if we make a little bit more, I'll tell you what, we'll grow more trees. So don't think of this as we're growing this many trees, and that's all we got. I promise you, if the demand goes up, our production will go up. Yeah.
Looks like in '09 or '10, saw timber itched back up in price. How did that occur during the housing crush that we had?
There was a brief flurry in the economy, and I got all excited and thought that it was the end of the crisis. And the flurry happened for a couple years, and or for really about 18 months, and then dropped back off again. It's happened several times. You'll see little blips in there. Housing will come back for a little while,
Yeah.
and prices will jump, and but then it goes away.
People were building all them damn decks.
I'm sorry.
They were building all them damn decks all over the place. It's a home and board.
Yeah. All right, are there other questions about the prices? Okay, I think this is really, really important. I already said it, we grow native trees on pretty flat soils if you look around the world. We don't have a lot of erosion associated with forestry, and what erosion we do, we control through these forestry best management practices. Those have been in place since '78. They were voluntary. We always joke that they're voluntary. If you don't follow them and something goes wrong, you pay big fines. So they're voluntary. You can do it if you want to or not, but you're going to pay if you don't. But they've been around since '78. Industry, the environmental community, and government got together and wrote those. They've been rewritten several times since then to adopt to new equipment and increasing standards. You know, we want to have continuous improvement on what we do. Our trees are about as green as they get. I told you I've worked around the world. We do it right, and we do it with native trees. Nobody else does that. So I say that's my opinion. But a significant proportion of our land is operated under one of three internationally accepted certification schemes. That's Sustainable Forestry Initiative, Forestry Stewardship Council, and the American Tree Farm System. All of those are internationally recognized. Not all of our land operates under those because they don't have to. So it's mostly the big timberland owners that do that. But so you got my opinion. I've seen it, and it'll stand up. I'm also telling you we've got the certification, which proves it too. I say it again, we don't get credit for using native trees. Whatever you guys do, put it in whatever you do, that we use native trees. We didn't get involved enough in these certification systems early to get adequate credit for that. And I'm going to deviate here, and I hope I'm okay on time, but in Uruguay, you can plant eucalyptus from Australia on native grasslands, destroying that native grassland ecosystem, and get the same credit that we get growing Georgia pine trees on Georgia soil. It makes 0 sense, and we have failed as a community to get proper credit for that. Try to do something about that. The other thing I like to emphasize, and I think may be interesting to you, is because of our private land ownership and the fact that every landowner has different objectives, we got a really diverse landscape. Compare it to what they have out west, where 50% of the land is owned by the state and federal government and has been treated the same way for 100 years. It's overstocked, hadn't been burned, and we've lost 44 million acres to the mountain pine beetle over the last 20 years, and you guys know it's burning up. It's all a homogeneous landscape. That isn't what we have here, because every landowner wants to do something different with their land, and it's a patchwork of all these small landowners. One of them might like big old trees. He's still cutting because he has to thin to manage that stand. Another one might like 20-year-old pine trees. Another one likes cows. Another one likes peanuts. You drive across this state, and if you'll open up your eyes and look, you'll see that we've got one of the most diverse ecosystems around. So don't forget that and compare it to what's out west. Okay, supply chain. I think we're ready. We got nurseries to produce seedlings. We've got landowners willing to buy those seedlings, plant them, grow, harvest them. That's in place. We need some markets. We have loggers to cut those trees and get them to the loading deck. That's in place. We've got a few issues with aging of our logging force and things like that. We've got truckers to take the trees from that loading deck to the mill. That's in place, but this is one area we need some help on insurance and on our labor force. I like to say that in the South, we deliver trees cheap, so we've got a lean, we deliver trees environmentally clean, green, tree growing machine in place. We're ready to go and supply what I think is a huge opportunity for the state. All right, what are our risks? We've got a great industry, pulp and paper industry and lumber industry, that already is doing what we want. They're creating jobs and they're sequestering carbon. Andres pointed it out. That's sequestered carbon right here. That's sequestered carbon. All those boards they saw up are sequestered carbon. We don't get credit for that either. We've been doing all along what everybody wants today. And our federal government is subsidizing people if they can figure out a way to take carbon out of the air and pump it in the ground. But we take carbon out of the air and put it in a building, but we don't get credit for it. So what I want to tell you guys, don't forget as you do your work that we got an existing industry that's already doing what we want. Don't forget them. They're there. And we might be able, they're in place already, and we might be able to accelerate some of this green transition by encouraging them. By the way, I use the word encouraging there because I don't know how you guys are going to do it, whether it's tax credits or what. So I just said encouraging. Make sure you encourage, I would encourage you to encourage our existing industry as well as our new industry. We also need a mix. So, part of what we're doing here is let's help manage this transition to a green economy, but we need to look after our forest ecosystem in the state of Georgia. In order to do that, we've got to have markets for small trees and large trees. If we don't have markets for large trees, we're going to wind up with a bunch of 20-year-old plantations. We don't want that. So we need markets for small trees and large trees, and I hope you'll keep that in mind as you do your work. And of course, if we do have all that kind of industry, hopefully that's more jobs, more manufacturing plants. Okay, a lot of you guys will know this, and Andres addressed it, and I agree with Andres, people are doing this stuff, but still, if you look back at Charles Hurdy, he figured out how to do it in 1932. It was 1940 before the first plant in Lufkin, Texas, actually commercially made newsprint, where they could make it on an operational basis. Hurdy could make it in the lab But it took 8 years to get to where that could be done commercially and at a cost-effective price. So a lot of these technologies that we're talking about, they exist, but they're in their infancies. And so, you know, for us, I think in Georgia, one of the challenges, how do we attract people here in a way that reduces their risk? Because they're investing in a technology that maybe hasn't been proven on a large-scale operational basis yet. The other one is the U.S., once again, lagging Europe. You know, we make pellets here and send them to Europe so they can use them to create green energy. You can't use pellets for green energy in the United States because the EPA doesn't, at least has not in the past, supported the use of wood as a carbon neutral source of energy. So we've got a few issues at the federal level. I think that's starting to change, and Andres, EPA is kind of rewriting some regs, but it's something to think about. We need to get that changed. Okay, we've got the raw material and the supply network to add jobs and tax base to our economy. I think it's comparable to what we can do, what happened with the pulp and paper industry from 1930 to 1980. Just to put that in perspective, there were 115 paper mills built in the U.S. South during that period. 115. The last one was built in '84. You know, if you think about it, it costs $3 billion now to build a paper mill. So maybe all those didn't cost $3 billion, but that was 115 $2 to $3 billion facilities that kicked the southern economy. And the last part is, just on the ecosystem side, we've got to have healthy forest, or we're going to wind up with fires and bugs eating up what we got out there. So this is an opportunity. What you guys are doing is an opportunity to hit on all these places: a healthy ecosystem, transition to a green economy, jobs and tax base. Can't beat it, fellas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any questions, any brief questions from, yes, Senator Halpern.
So I want to make sure I understand something. You mentioned a lot the pulp and paper industry and the decline in mills, and you did too, Andres. So, but you also said that in Europe and Finland, they're continuing to grow them. We understand that they're very expensive. And my question is, as we think about, I'm trying to understand where that fits into the overall, right, ecosystem. So as we're thinking about new markets, we can do some of the kind of policy work that needs to be done and say tax credits, but are you in fact telling us that we actually need more investments also in some of the mills in order to be able to take the product, have it converted into the thing that is ultimately going to be supplied to whoever wants to purchase it? Like, that's the whole kind of ecosystem with new markets. Where does the mills piece, the paper and pulp mills specifically, fit into the problem that we're going to have, even if we do the good policy work?
We're talking about Jet A, sustainable aviation fuel, methanol for ships, all kinds of new products that will probably be new mills. But there's also opportunity with existing industry. An example would be we're learning how to make plastic substitutes out of paper. You know, the plastic six-pack rings?
Yes.
We can make those out of paper now. And it's wonderful because if they get dumped in the ocean,
Yeah.
they dissolve.
Right.
Unlike the plastic stuff. So that's the point, is that the pulp and paper industry also, if it's in a favorable economic climate, can contribute to this, and we can kind of reinvent that industry and perpetuate it, as opposed to letting it go down and shift to other parts of the world where they are making the investments in those mills. So yes, I think that's what I was my point is, that's part of the solution, I think, is maybe we can stimulate those mills to reinvent themselves into the green economy, where right now I don't think the regulatory climate is favorable to them to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Thomas, thank you for that. That was very informative, and we appreciate you being here and bringing your obvious years of expertise and distilling them down so we can benefit from that. Tim Lowermore, where are you, Tim? Would you please come forward? Tim, my constituent and friend, and someone I have sought out in the past for advice on these issues, is currently GFC Executive Director, but he has moving over to this building in a way. When are you going to land here, Tim? When do you
October
start?
1st.
October
Yeah,
1st.
big shoes to fill, right?
You, well, yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim, thanks
Yep.
for being here.
Never shied away from a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Never shied. No, thank you, Mr. Senator, Mr. President. You did acknowledge that I am a constituent of yours, and you get 4 votes out of my house now. I've got 4 voters in my house, and so we'll be getting them home to take care of that when that comes around. So
Great, thank you. I need it.
absolutely, yeah, you do. It's tight for you there. No, I'm just kidding. And I'm sorry, I did not mean to run Senator Ginn off. I know I have that effect on him every now and then. So. No, it's great. It's great to be here, and I was gonna. I'll set my watch up here. No, I'm just. I think I was asked to be here, and you guys. I mean, 2 really experts ahead of me to have to follow is a big challenge, and really just 2 mentors and friends of mine. They really laid out a lot for you, and I think I was asked to come talk to you really about the sustainability of our resource and what our state does. From a state perspective, governmental agency perspective, to contribute to that sustainability of our resource. So I'm going to really focus in on that. I think I'm going to park right at the end on a couple things that I think are opportunities from our state's managed forest, and then I'll certainly be happy to take questions from this group if that is desired. Y'all have talked about this. I don't think we can talk about it enough. These things run parallel to each other. We are a #1 state for business, and thank you for your leadership and your contributions as state leaders to get us there. We've had great executive leaders that have helped us be here too over the last decade, and we're thankful for those gentlemen and for their contributions to ensure that Georgia remains a good place to do business. We have a pro-business environment. We have great infrastructure in our highways and our roads and in our ports. We have a world-class education system that provides qualified workers to work in all industries, including the forest product sector. So many of you know that I was in a role previous to the commission role with a company that invested a lot of capital into this state and really moved their U.S. headquarters to Peachtree City, not far from here. And I can tell you I can't tell you the times that this came up, how excited they were to be in this state because of the support that they felt as a business in investing in this state. And I just can't, I don't think y'all hear that enough, that it matters what you do. It matters the posture that you take as a body and the rules and the laws and the things that you do as a Senate. It matters, and it gets talked about in boardrooms all around this state all the time. So thank you for continuing to support businesses. And I think through an effort like this, you'll continue to see Georgia be a great place to do business. And then ultimately, I think it will be a great place to invest in some of this forest innovation that you guys are going to be talking about. There's no place better. Our sustainability story, 24 million acres, 22 million acres of forest in our state that are available. Andre said 2 tons, or would you say 13 seconds to load a log truck. That's what's growing out there in our forest, 2 tons per second. That's staggering to think about the amount of timber and the amount of volume of timber that is growing. And Georgia's unique because 64% of our state is covered with forest. 91% of that are owned by forest landowners like Mac Peden, that I believe you're going to hear about a little bit later. Larry Spillers, who's a forest landowner as well, will be talking to you. Those individuals rely on healthy markets for their sustainability, and I hope you get a sense of that from their presentations as we go forward. So our sustainability story, and I really, my team, I've got a couple of our members that are here. Johnny Sabo is our deputy director, and then Devin Dartnell and I were talking about how do we sum up Georgia's sustainability story in a way that is close. I mean, it's really just kind of just sums it up for y'all. I mean, it just gives you what you need to know that says, you know, we can do more. We also can support our existing businesses that are here, our pulp and paper sectors, our sawmills that are here, but we also have the capacity to do more. How do you as leaders have the confidence to walk out of this room today to say, yeah, we can do more, and we're not going to create harm to other sectors? So we came up with the next few slides to just really kind of talk about that. And this first one here I think is really important. It talks about all species, the bar chart on the far left there, and it's really the growth is in green. The harvest is in sort of a, I'm not very good with colors, so I'm going to say yellow or gold. And then the right is the difference, the amount of volume that is available that is not being harvested for the existing industry on an annual basis. So we're doing about 45 to 50% more volume standing on this tree, standing on the stump every year that is available to support the existing businesses that are here, forest-based businesses, and also to exist, potentially support new forest-based businesses and a forest-based economy here in our state. So, and then to the right, which you guys will be provided with these presentations so you can study this a little bit more, it breaks it out between softwoods and hardwoods, because we often hear where we're harvesting all of our timber, we're cutting all of our trees. I will tell you that no, we're not. And I'm very proud to report that. And a lot of this work was done previous to me, the good work of ensuring that we do our forest, we manage our forest in a sustainable way. And I'm proud to say that we continue to do that here in our state. This report, sustainability has been important to the legislature for a long time in our state. In the early 2000s, the legislature asked the Georgia Forestry Commission to do this report every 5 years, report on the sustainability of Georgia's forest. We delivered this report to this body and to the House and to the Senate and to the governor's office this earlier in January. I think we gave it to you guys in March. We delivered a copy to you on your desk, and then we also provided it electronically to your teams back at the Capitol. This report has so much information in it to talk about the sustainability of our resource. And I want you to know that, to me, is a great foundation for you guys to lean on as you go forward and make recommendations around how our state can support forest innovation. Mr. Thomas talked about, so how are we doing environmentally, and how do we know that we're supporting our, and doing things in a wise way, and not harming today's generations or not harming future generations for the way that we support our current generations. Every 2 years, this report gets published. It's really a report card on how timber harvesting and timber practices are performing around our state. This report that you have here is highlighted in this slide. Shows that we have a record percentage of compliance when it comes to implementing best management practices that protect our streams and our waterways and our environment. This year, this survey says we've got a record percentage. It's around 96% implementation of best management practices this year. So our sector, the forest products industry, our forestry professionals, our forest landowners in our state, take managing their land and being good stewards seriously, and I'm proud to say that we've got a report card that you guys can build on for forest innovation as we go forward that demonstrates that. And so why do I say that, and how do we know that? So our agency, and I'll just point out that those previous 3 slides are all reports that our team are responsible for gathering and reporting. And this body in our state, thankfully, invests a great amount of resources into an agency to do that kind of work. Every day, the Georgia Forestry Commission employees wake up to go ensure those 3 things and those 3 reports, we're still doing well in those arenas. Mr. Thomas talked about southern pine beetles. We have flights ongoing today where we're surveying pine beetle activity in our state. I didn't even realize we did that as a Georgia Forestry Commission until about 3.5 years ago when I came to work here. That this time of year, we have airplanes that are up surveying pine beetle activity. So if Mr. Mac Peden has pine beetle activity, we can reach out to him and say, hey, you need to go out and take care of that activity so we can prevent an epidemic from happening like what he's discussed that happened in British Columbia. How do we know that inventory, that growth and harvest data that I talked about 3 slides previously? We've got foresters that are out in the field today measuring plots that they go to every 5 years, and then that data gets extrapolated into that report. They do that every day on behalf of all Georgians to ensure that Georgia's forests are sustainable and can support the industry and the forest-based economy as well as the community that's there. So I'm really proud to be a part of that team. I'm proud of the work that they do, and I think you should find confidence in that as leadership. You've got an agency that you can build a foundation on to make investment into new forest innovation in our state. Sort of a risk management tool. So I'll just stop. I want to talk, I mean, those are 3 quick slides on sustainability. I want to park here for on the end here and just talk about future contributions of our managed forest. And y'all have talked about SAF. You're going to continue to talk about that. Huge opportunity. We've heard that, and it is pretty common knowledge in the forest products sector in the U.S. South that it gets said very often that we'll never see another paper mill or pulp mill be built in the U.S. South. I would contend can have another facility that costs $3 billion to be built. It may not make paper, but it may be able to make SAF fuel. I would also talk to you about mass timber. Y'all have talked about that quite a bit. Andres talked about it. He discussed it. I would contend and ask this committee to think about, are we doing all we can do in the public sector to promote that? And I would challenge you to dig into that. I would challenge you to think about that. We invest an enormous amount of money as the state, to build structures. Since I've been in this role, we have continued to promote wood construction in university systems, in state buildings, and the response generally is, well, it's going to cost 10 or 15% more. I would contend to tell you that many projects that we build as state officials sometimes don't get managed, and they can be 10 or 15% more anyway. So I would ask you to think about that as leaders in this state. Are we doing all we can do in the public sector to promote a new and emerging opportunity here in our state around mass timber? And then lastly, I would just point out here, it's a pretty cool picture there, trees going into the negative anode on a battery that Andres talked about. I hope that you recognize and realize that at Georgia Tech today, we have scientists that are working on that project, largely in part of our executive leadership, Governor Kemp. About 6 months after I got on this job, may not even been that long, I got a text from him on a Sunday afternoon, and it was a CNBC article about Storo Enzo. It says, can we do this with yellow pine? And I said, I don't know, because I don't know what I don't know. And it was a new article to me. And I said, give me till Monday, and I'll call back. I'll get you what you need. Talked to Devin on our team, talked with others, and Andres, I think we were talking about it. And lo and behold, there's a process that it can be done. We don't know exactly how, but scientists at Georgia Tech are working on that today, and Governor Kemp included in his budget, I think it was 2 years ago, a total of $3 million over 3 years, $1 million a year to fund that research at Georgia Tech. So that work is being done today at Georgia Tech to take southern yellow pine and convert it into the negative anode on a battery. What a huge circular economy that Andres was talking about with the work that's being done around EVs and batteries in our state, to be able to connect the forest product sector, the rural economies of our state, to that great opportunity that's happening in certain other regions of our state. What a huge opportunity that exists there. So, and I would just end, I'm gonna stop there, and but I do wanna end, Marshall, I was hoping was gonna get into this, or Mr. Thomas, I should say, excuse me there, Mr. Thomas. He talked about this, he presented at the Georgia Forestry Association meeting this past weekend, and he said something that, it was so obvious that I don't think we think about it enough. And he talked about the Hurdy movement and how we went from the early 1900s to where we're at in the early 1990s to where we're at today with the pulp and paper sector and how we got there. And he talked about how the community got behind that, how state leadership got behind that paper movement and the Hurdy movement. And I contend for us to get to where we want to be in forest innovation, you as state leaders, you as state senators and state legislators, and then I think the community all have to be committed to make it happen. And I don't think there's anything too big that we can't accomplish together. So, and I'm very thankful that you guys are focused on this. I think there's a great and enormous need. And I would just say that there are parts in our state, to speak to one of the questions that came up earlier from Senator Goodman, Chairman Goodman, about return on timber investment. When markets come and there becomes competitive opportunities in markets, because wood markets are local. They're local to where those mills are at, 60 miles, 80 miles. Wood doesn't move. Logs don't move much further than that to go to a facility. But we have regions in our state, particularly down in southwest Georgia, where we have significant amount of sawmill capacity currently. And it's some of the best saw timber prices that you will get really on the planet, definitely in the southeast. So I'm convinced with more opportunity in future forest innovation and also future additional support for our existing industry that's here, we can do a lot more to sustain Georgia's forest, and we can do a lot more to sustain Georgia's forest landowners, and we can do a lot more to sustain our rural communities. So thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I will stop there and be happy to take any questions.
Tim, thank you
Yep.
for that. Any questions, Mr. Williams?
Quick ones. Thank you, Tim, for what you do, and your staff do a tremendous job in North Georgia protecting our communities. Over my lifetime up there, I've noticed the U.S. Forest Service has sort of pulled back from a lot of their resources. They don't protect the forests like they used to. They don't do select cuts or clear cuts, but Georgia Forestry's there to help put out fires and protect us. But thank you for that. I was looking at that third slide. If you had a chance to flip back to it, I'm not sure what industrial uses are versus non-industrial on the land ownership pie chart. Could you explain that? Looks like the majority of the forest land in Georgia is non-industrial private.
That's correct.
And what is non-industrial? How do you categorize
That would be a private forest landowner.
So that would be like Rayonier?
No, that would be a Mr. Mac Peden or a Tim Lowermore, a non-industrial private forest.
Just a homeowner with 100 acres of
200
land?
acres,
Okay.
500 acres.
So,
yeah.
yeah, we have that. But on the rest of that chart, you have 4%, is it 4% federal?
For federal and
And
state.
then 6% for industry, I'm having a hard time reading it.
I think it's 4%, if I'm looking at that correctly too,
Okay.
sir. Sorry, that is kind of small.
So my question is, National Forest in Georgia, I don't know of anywhere in North Georgia they're doing any kind of select cuts or clear cuts. Are you seeing that anywhere in Georgia at all?
Where National Forest are doing select cuts.
Yes.
Uh,
How are they managing their forest if they don't cut it?
The National Forest?
It's not a trick question, but.
No, it's not a
I think I
trick
know
question.
the answer.
Hold on a minute.
They are not very they are not very active timber harvesting, market participants. Is that okay? Is that a fair
That's,
answer?
They don't
thank
do
you.
nothing.
So, but we're losing a resource. I mean, those trees are gonna mature, and they're gonna rot and fall, and they're dead, while there's an opportunity there for alternative sources of energy. The U.S. policy, in my opinion, is missing a great opportunity. Are you agreeing with that?
Yeah, the U.S. Forest Service, they do not harvest timber at an alarming rate.
You would recommend that anyone who has a forest, a large forest, should manage their timber and should harvest it every so many years. I mean, that's just proper management of a forest.
Woodchip, yes, sir.
Right. Thank you.
If you don't, eventually it's gonna burn or get eaten by bugs.
We're seeing that, that's my concern.
Yep.
I don't know if you
Well,
have.
most of our
other
southern
parts of
pine
the state.
beetle activity originates off of U.S. Forest Service land or adjacent lands. So there's.
Yes, sir.
Congressman Westerman talked just about that. Once the national forests quit harvesting, then all the industry left.
Right.
Now they have all that fuel on the ground that's burning up their forest and they have nowhere to sell it or to get rid of it. So it's a dangerous thing when you start taking that type of lack of actually harvesting, and then you turn into a huge problem, and now they have nowhere to even sell and get rid of it. It's costing them $3,000 to $4,000 an acre to chip it and put it on the ground because they have no market to sell it.
Right.
So that's a dangerous thing that happens if you don't support the industry and wouldn't allow it to be done.
Thank you.
I would just tell you that the very small amount of harvest that they do, they contract with the State Forestry Commission to manage that through the Good Neighbor Agreement. They can't even, they don't manage it on their own. They don't manage their own timber harvest. We manage their timber harvest for them on U.S. Forest Service land.
Chairman Goodman.
I just wanted to say, Tim, you've spent the night at the farm and spent the night in the old house and everything, and you've seen all those pictures where, you know, they had all the legislators down in the 20s when they were trying to get the paper industry going. They're talking about having a supported legislature. I'm going into my 5th year in the state senate, and I have never served on a study committee that I had the president pro tem of the Senate and a majority leader sitting next to me. So I think that says a lot about how the state senate.
We're just worried about what you're gonna say next.
The priority that we have a Senate study committee that's being chaired by the president pro tem and the majority leader sitting next to him. So I think that says a lot about how the state senate understands how important the forestry industry is. And just add one thing to that, y'all. 24 million acres. I'm glad you went back. You asked me to go back to that. 24 million forested acres in the state of Georgia. When you think about how important forestry is, there's only 38 million acres in the entire state of Georgia, and 24 million of it is forest land. How big of an industry that is, and recreation, and I think about things economically, and you know how it supports small landowners and large landowners, and the jobs it creates, and the tax digest, and everything. So I think it means a lot that you got this kind of representation on the study committee from our chamber.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate, yes, sir. Chairman again.
Look here, next slide. We took the price of forest products and forest, the timber, and we tripled it. That third column you got in each of those slides, the difference, would that open up a market? People say, hey, we're gonna quit wasting this to if the price of timber tripled, would that column on the third, in one of each of those slides just drop down drastically because you're saying, hey, we're gonna sell that stuff. It's no longer gonna be wasted, because right now the difference is wasted, is it not?
The difference is standing on the stump.
And so what's happening to it? What, that difference,
It's continuing to grow and continue to contribute more to the next year's delta difference.
okay, so that difference is not
Yeah,
just timber that's not harvested. It's timber that continues to grow, but will it ever be harvested?
I think at some point, yes, sir, I would speculate it would be harvested. But it'd be speculation. And I guess it depends on the landowner's, there's so many factors into that question, really. I mean, it's like what the landowner's objective is, what his or her desire is. But potentially, I would say yes. at
I
some
just
point.
wonder where the market price plays into that.
It's more demand than price. The wood's there because we're able to satisfy all the demand currently in the state with less than we're growing. So
Yeah.
it's wood that we don't have an opportunity to sell because the demand is down. And it's still out there, it just accrues to inventory. That's the neat thing about trees, unlike an agricultural crop. If you don't cut it this year, it grows next year and it's still there, it's still in your inventory.
Unfortunately, like saw timber gets too big for the market.
It can get too
And then it goes to waste. So if you let it get too big, no mills can take it, so.
An excellent point, and we're at risk of
Tim, thank you for those comments.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your service to Georgia and the position you've been in. Mac Peden. Mr. Peden, would you come forward? Thank you for being with us today. Someone who can speak to us about having forestry in your family for many, many generations. Yes, sir. We look.
don't do anything, it's gonna be gone. That's why you're here.
Yes, sir. Listen and learn. That's why we're here.
I understand. I wasn't trying to be, difficult. I'm trying to make a point, which I'll try to make now. I only have a couple of slides. Do I have to make them come up? I apologize. I retired from the corporate world where I had a staff. Now I have none. It's just me and the trees, and I'm technically incompetent. So which place? The down there? All right, so I'm gonna go to my second slide and then come back to this, get it down for the next one, and then come back. So this is a little bit like Marshall's slide. 1950 was a time when my father bought a piece of property for about $25 an acre. He passed away in 1993, and I kind of came back home and looked at what that land had done for the last 45 years. And the salt timber had gone from $6 a ton to $44 a ton. The land had gone from 25 to 150. I did the math on that. It was a 12% compound annual return for 45 years. That was 2 points better than the S&P had done since 1926. So it's like a no-brainer. This is a great business. So I'm going to get in it. So in 1995, I bought my first piece of property. And you see what happened since then to today. So the land at 150 went to 1,500. The timber at 44 went to 28. So from a 12% compound annual return, I went to maybe 6 to 8 over the last life cycle. Going forward, to Russ's point, at $1,500 an acre, you cannot plant pine trees and make a return. You just can't do it. So I don't have an answer for that. What you're doing will help. But we've got to have more markets for these trees, because you've got an input of $1,500 an acre where it used to be 150. So what you've got to grow on that $1,500 acre of land in return to make a decent, it's got to be more than $28 a ton for pine trees or $7 a ton for pulpwood, which is what I've been getting for 30 years. Is just not going anywhere. And your point about on the stump that you asked Senator again about, does it sit there? I finally cut 100 acres last year. I keep waiting, and the price is going to go up, and it's not. And the trees had gotten to a point where they were growing at 4%, they were dying at 4%. So I wasn't making anything. So I just cut the trees and take my lumps. In 95, when I first went into the business, I bought one piece of property, fortunately only one, that had standing timber on it. And we cruised it, my forester cruised it, so I paid $44 a ton for that standing timber. I cut it finally in 2019 and got $24 a ton for it. So it did not, you do the math. Fortunately, it grew, and I didn't lose money, but my return was like 1%. So as a landowner, I'm just saying we need help. And I took a look at what's going to happen in the future. I'm there, and I'm going to stay there because I grew up in Sparta. My family's been there for 200 years, and I love it there. But my granddaughter, not so much. My grandson, they're in Atlanta. They're going to Atlanta schools. They're thinking about going to here, there, yonder. What are they going to do? My best advice to them is when I'm gone, take the stepped-up basis, sell it, because you're not making a decent return, unless we can do something. So, I don't know what all these private landowners are going to do over time. Everybody's got a different objective, and I'm going to keep mine, but, it's not somewhere people are going to invest and do it for economic reasons and buy forest land. I looked at the land report, and there were like 150 parcels of land for sale across the state of Georgia, 500 acres and more. And there wasn't, I couldn't find a single one that, with a little bit of analysis, I think the basic land value was $1,500 an acre. So I can't imagine anybody wanting to grow timberland at a profit in today's price is gonna buy any of that land. It's gonna all go to recreational use, or somebody's gonna buy it and hopefully something good happens. So I just don't know what's gonna happen in our forest products industry if we don't get more markets. I mean, you're not gonna get the land to go down. And the land's $1,500 an acre, it's not gonna drop dramatically. But $28 a ton could go to 44 again. Pulpwood could go to 15 if we can use it to make biofuel or sustainable aviation fuel or whatever else we can do. But I think we've got to do more. This was kind of putting this in numbers. It's just going forward, we don't have the opportunities that we had in the past. So I'll stop at that because I've got a lot more I could say, but I mean, that's the bottom line. We've got to create markets, or, there's some things we can, I'm sorry, I couldn't just say, things we can do to reduce the price. We didn't pass it been not a big deal, but it'd been a little help, the ad valorem tax that I pay when I cut timber. I mean, that's wrong. I understand that I was in the Senate here, and I understand the senator that objected to it because, well, all the Georgians shouldn't pay for me to get a tax break because they were going to reimburse the counties, right, for that lost tax. Well, all the Georgians are benefiting from, as we've said before, the clean air, the clean water, the services that our farms provide that we get no return from. Can you pay us to plant? Like in the longleaf pine in South Georgia, you can plant pine all day long and that you get 100% of your cost reimbursed through federal programs, right? You can make a little bit more if you don't have to pay for it. We have to pay everything. So there's some little things. Truck weights help, give us a little bit more. High truck weights would help even more. So there are a number of things that can be done. But you're on the right track. And the Hurdy moment, I mean, we're there. If we don't do something fairly dramatic in this business, that it's going to change dramatically. My final thought, and this is, I'm not sure how you do this, but as I see the land ownership change and the timberland owner that has owned it in the past, now he's not owning it. Some guy, my neighbor in Atlanta that has money, doesn't know what to do with it. He goes and buys 1,000 acres because he wants to deer hunt, and maybe he can put some quail out there. He's not into growing pine trees. But we're going to give him that CUVA valuation that keeps his taxes low forever. I think we're going to have to figure out some way to make sure if you get the CUVA exemption, you've got to be growing trees or at some level. You've got to be helping. You can't just let it go and get that lower tax. That makes sense? So, and just an idea. So, Senator, again, you had a...
Yeah, Mr. Beaton, thank you. Yeah, Chairman Ginn, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. You're looking at the return on your timber.
I'm looking to return my total investment.
Your return on your land, said for that, you went back and looked at your graph from 95 to 2024.
Right.
Said that's a pretty significant return in that year. What else would you be doing with your land if you're not growing timber on it?
Well, I wouldn't be doing anything. I would sell it to, one of your wealthy friends that wants to pay $1,500 an acre plus the timber to go out and shoot deer, build them a little cabin, build them a little pond, and have a nice place to go. That's who's going to buy it. I mean, if you notice, there are a couple of land companies from the far west that have started setting up here in Georgia. Great Waters. I had lunch with a guy the other day. He was wanted to buy my farm. He sent me a map of my whole farm. Said, I've got an investor who wants to buy it and pay maybe $3,000 an acre. $3,000 an acre. It's growing timber. It's not worth $3,000 an acre. But I don't want to sell it. I heard a country song yesterday. This guy comes out, wants to buy his land, and he called it country dirt, country cheap or something. He said, I don't want to sell it. It doesn't matter. No matter what you pay me, I'm not going to sell it. Well, most people are not going to be like that. So It's just not profitable to grow trees on the land that you have to pay for today.
Thank you. Chairman Goodman.
I was just gonna add, it's, you know, the land itself, is a much better investment than the timber that you're growing on it. But, for me and for, you know, people like us that have land that's been in the family for 200 years, you get an emotional attachment to that land, but it also talks about the fabric of the state and the fabric of rural America. And, you know, I would like it to be where, I think when you look at what forests do for the state, and also for the family farms and the family timber farms that are across the state, there's no doubt, that the land, you can sell it and you can at some point, get that appreciation in the land, but that's not helping me pay my son's tuition at the University of Georgia right now, because we don't intend to sell our land, you know what I'm saying? We want to pass it down to the next generation. And so, for me as a timber farmer, I want it to be where my kids, I can pass that land down to the next generation, and I can still pay for them to get their degree at the University of Georgia. And that's kind of where I don't want it to, that's why we've got to change this rate of return. Like I said, it's 1.5%. But you're talking about changing the fabric of the state and the fabric of the country when the family farm, whether it be growing corn or trees, you can't pass it down to the next generation. And for me right now, our family, we could sell our land, pay the capital gains taxes on it, and take the money and invest it in a mutual fund and make 3 times as much as we are trying to grow trees. And not have to worry about catching on fire or anything else, you know? So that's the point I guess I was trying to make. I would never discount that the land itself is a good investment, but you have to sell it, and you have to sell your heritage, and you have to sell a piece of who you are. And so that's why we're, you know, hopefully we can come out about something like this that we can change that, you know?
Yeah, and that really doesn't show the fact that the 6% return I made because the land went way up. And to Senator Goodman's point, I didn't make any money on the timber. So I got this big balance sheet over here of valuable land, but when I go to sell my timber, I don't get much at all. So I'm getting like 1.5% for that. And all my money is tied up in the land. The only way I'm gonna get that is I gotta sell it.
Okay. Chairman Walker, final question.
Mr. Peden, thank you for your testimony. Is the song you're referring to by Cody Johnson titled Dirt Cheap?
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
Dirt cheap.
It's dirt rich, isn't it?
Dirt cheap.
Okay.
We'll settle that argument later.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Peden, thank you for being here.
All right.
Your graphs and your presentation really distill the issue very well for us, and so thank you for that.
Okay.
And
good.
thank you for your
Thank you for
time.
having me. I appreciate you hearing, and you're right on it, because we need to be here today, and you're there, so I appreciate you.
Yes, sir, you're welcome.
Thank
Thank you for that. Our last speaker, Larry Spillers, a good friend of mine and another constituent. Larry has been in the forestry industry just about his whole life. He also owns and manages a fantastic commercial hunting plantation over in Crawford County, right outside of Knoxville Plantation. And I will share with you that the first time I heard the phrase sustainable aviation fuel was from Larry about 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe. Some time back. He came to see me at the office. And he said, John, this is not widely known, but there's a way to take pine trees and make aircraft fuel out of it. And I thought he was kidding. And I said, Larry, you talking about putting a loblolly pine in a big vise and just squeezing it tight enough and then we're going to get jet fuel? He said, no, it's a little more complicated than that. Larry's been on the front edge of talking about this issue, knowing that it was coming. And so, Larry, thank you for being here today and appreciate what you're going to share with us.
Okay. Well, thank y'all. Thank you, senators, for being here and being part of this committee to improve our marketing and implementation of that. And thank you, President Kennedy, for having me. He's actually already done a pretty good introduction of myself, and that's part of what I was going to do is give you some of my background. I know I've helped some of y'all through some of our different facilities, manufacturers that we have in the state to understand some of the technology to take back to your areas also. But I did tell Charlie, I said, Charlie, make sure I don't speak last, because the last time I was invited to speak, Director Tim had me last, and everybody else had said what I had written down to say. So I was left to give a story that Jerry Clower had, but I'm gonna save y'all from that. I'm not even gonna use any slides today. Obviously, these guys have done an excellent job of presenting some of the ideas and things of where we are in forestry and how we got there. So I'm just gonna reemphasize a couple of those and maybe give a couple of my ideas I think that y'all may need to carry with you if that's okay as a committee. First of all, I do want y'all to know, I'm not 100% you know what you've bitten off being part of this, because this is obviously some huge complex issue that's gotta be resolved. If it wasn't, I'm telling you, this group and people around us would already had these markets resolved. As already been stated, here in Georgia, and we as an industry have done an excellent job through genetics, site preparation, growing trees and timber, which it has us in our, as the cliche is, the #1 forestry state in the nation. What we haven't done, in my opinion, as an industry, is to bring at the same pace along the markets. And that's kind of what's got us in a mess today. We live in a society where we want everything instant, right? And we think about things tomorrow. In agricultural, if you want a different size chicken, in a few weeks we can grow you one. If we're growing corn, you want more cotton, next year we can provide that. The problem with the timber industry, because of, as you know, the way it grows, we have to plan out years and years and years. And if we don't do that, instead of being the #1 forestry state in the nation, we quickly could be the #50th state in the nation. That can happen because, as the gentleman said, investors. There's not a day that goes by that I don't get a call. I'm sorry, not a day, a week that doesn't go by that I don't get a call or a letter in the mail wanting to buy my timberland. And the vast majority of those, it turns out, is the solar panel people. And I'm close to some high transmission lines, so they want that property. That's going to obviously take away from our forest. And then our friends in Atlanta are not going to be able to have the clean air and clean water that we're able to take advantage of now. And that's something kind of abstract, and people, we have it, but I don't think enough people realize how we're getting it and how important it is to keep it. As I said, some of y'all know me very well, some not so well, maybe just met today, but I was going to give you a little background on myself. So I am part of 3 generations where the primary income has come from the forest industry. I have over 4 decades in the forest industry, spanning through procurement, harvesting. It began with a chainsaw and a pulpwood truck. Some of y'all may not know what that is, but I'll assure you, you do not want to know what that is. So that's where I started, but I've had experience in the pulp manufacturing facility, forestry management for the company that had over 350,000 acres, sawmill and dimensional lumber operational manager there. I am a member of the Georgia Forestry Association, board member here. I'm a past president of the SFI, Georgia Implementation Committee, and I'm actually the current chairman of the Georgia Forestry Commission board. I own about 2,000 acres of managed timberland, primarily in Crawford County, but in some other adjacent counties, just right here in our area where we are now. And as John had alluded to, about 1,000 of those is a managed quail hunting preserve. So managed timberland that I have is a diversity of young saplings all the way up to some of the largest diameter stand pine trees we have in our area at least. And as Senator Frank said, they're probably actually too large for many sawmills, at least in our area. But the markets are key to the success of the forest industry. And so the things that they've already said, I won't rehash a lot of those, but here's some of the things I want you to think about. So I'll reemphasize this because this is very important. As we talk about looking at the forest industry, we really need to go after the things that's going to give us the majority of our effort that we go after. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. This may not be a good example, but we could have an industry that makes toothpicks, and so that'd be a very small volume. Everybody could get excited about that. That may not be the way to do. So it's going to, from y'all's perspective, y'all going to have to decide if we're going to support, especially economically, and support how are we gonna get the best bang for our buck, and what areas of that? The other thing that's gonna be very important for you to, is not to get too excited about one, product from the timberland. As Mr. Thomas said, it's important, we've gotta look at our products all the way from our pine straw to our turpentine to our mature, timber for saw timber. And so there's all kind of, diversity in between there. So in other words, if we go all out at doing one thing for, use the example for large saw timber, that's not gonna help us that much, because we're gonna need the markets to bring along those other products that we had to get to that large saw timber. So, again, this is gonna be this is a big thing that you're looking at, and a real big puzzle, and it's got a lot of pieces to it. So that's what you gotta kinda keep in mind, as you move forward, because that's very, very important. The other thing is, keep in mind that the trees are long-term. So as someone said earlier, what we're doing now is could be for our kids or our grandkids' decisions we're making as far as what markets that you have in place that makes sure that our forest industry is sustainable. That's something very hard for us to do, because we want something tomorrow. We want something that we can do in the next session. But again, we've got to make plans for long-term for it to work. We're not a agricultural product that we can change overnight or in a few years. Some of the ideas that I want to throw out to you is, that I think I help a lot too, is don't just look at the industry. For example, if you're looking at increasing or helping our lumber industry, look at all the material that they make, like the cross-laminated material. I talked to some friends and I said, well, why are we not doing more? And they said, well, the reason I'm not doing cross-laminated timber in my design is because we don't have a manufacturer close. Now, obviously, we do have one in Alabama, but I want one in Georgia. So we don't have the manufacturer to do it. So I talked to people who manufacture and invest in it, and they said, well, we don't invest it because nobody's designing and wanting to build it. So it's like, what comes first, car or egg? So somehow we've got to have an effort to jumpstart these different industries, to get them motivated to move in the direction where we can continue to have that. We've got to work make sure we support existing industries, because if we have all new and then we leave those behind, then we haven't made any net forward, right? But there's things like, and y'all saw this, I think, on your visit, but we have pulp mills, and the pulp industry is struggling, global competition, but those are places that are relatively easy, instead of building new facilities, to convert into the sustainable aviation fuel facilities. A lot of what goes on there with the machinery and the chemistry is pretty much in place. So that's another perspective that you got to think about. So it's not that if you started there, you're not abandoning. It may be where you want to talk to them and say, hey, how can we move forward? How can we modify those facilities? Another thing is just as important with the diversity of the trees is the diversity of where those trees are located through our state. Tim alluded to this, where they don't, economically, we can't move them very far. So as we to think about those models to develop, we need something in North Georgia. We need something in Middle Georgia. We need something in South Georgia. It's just as important to have it diverse across our state instead of just one. When y'all thinking about, well, how do we move forward with improving the markets? Again, Tim said we really have been pushing for the universities. I'd like to see our public schools. We just had a new one built in our county. Why wasn't it built with wood? We have our forests. If we're having taxpayer money and we want to make sure we have clean water and clean air in our state, and wood can be competitive, cross-laminated timber, why aren't every public facility that we have taxpayers' money at least evaluating? I'll ask you to write down, if you're not familiar with it, the code in Georgia, 50-5-63, where, and other codes that are mandated, that's been on our books for a long time. Those things need to be re-energized and said, hey, ask those people, if we're spending this money and we're going to appropriate it, have you looked at wood? At least ask the question. I think what happened in the past, even though those laws have been around some, is because steel and concrete and other things to build were so much cheaper, it was just kind of pushed aside, but now things have changed. It needs to be brought back up and said, hey, this is on the books. Let's make sure we're at least following the law, right? Maybe that law needs to be even strengthened, but at least need to be asking the question, when we're budgeting or appropriating money, has wood been considered in these facilities across the state? If you were looking for ways to improve the markets. That's pretty much it. Another thing is as Georgia Tech has done a lot of work, I read publications of all across the United States, especially out in the Pacific Northwest, where there is a lot of the governmental agencies and the universities are really behind pushing their forest industry innovative technologies. To be frank with you, in our university system in Georgia, I don't see it. It may be doing it, but it's not publicized in a way that I see that. So really helping fund our universities across the state, that they have the tools, the technology, and the funds too, and to make sure they're encouraged and emphasize them to be looking at what y'all are also looking for to make sure, because obviously that's your educational arm. They have a lot of ability to do that. So that's just some nuggets. I'll leave it there. I know we're getting close to lunchtime, but I do appreciate the work that y'all are doing. If I can help any way, I'd be glad to do it in any kind of way. And I did mention one time, I think we were in Atlanta, I was telling John, it's more like a liquor steal, and John said, since he's my attorney, he said, let's don't go there. But the process is pretty close to, we can make fuel a long time ago. We used to put it in the, I won't go there.
Thank you. Any questions for Larry?
I have
No,
one quick question.
Larry, yeah, we got a question.
In 30 seconds, tell us how this process works. How do you take a stick of wood and turn it into a fuel?
Do you know how to make liquor from corn?
I can't confirm or deny that.
He's from Northeast Georgia, of course he does.
Let me remind you what former Senator John Wilkinson used to remind everybody. In South Georgia, y'all measure your corn by the bushel. In North Georgia, we measure our corn by the gallon.
Gallon, there you go.
That,
Very layman terms, it's a very similar process. So what you're doing is you're trying to create sugars from anything, whatever. I mean, you can do it with blueberries. I didn't mean to say that. But you do it with corn, but you can also do it with fiber. But the problem, so it can be done easily, not easily. It can be done, but the problem is the process took so long, so economically, it wasn't feasible to do. So now, and it's because of the yeast. I don't know if you saw this, but you can Google it or whatever. University of Georgia, one of the guys even come up with something called super yeast. So really, that's all it is. It's really taking the fibers from wood and cooking those down, using yeast to create those sugars, just like a liquor steal. Okay, so that's basically what's happening in layman's terms. Again, it's been the difficulty or the time consuming, because with the fibers has the lignins, it's holding it together and protecting it. That's why if this tree, this piece of wood didn't have lignin in it, or it would just fall apart, right? So it's just like nature's glue that's holding it together. Well, that kind of protects it too and makes it harder to do it. So there are people in technology that have already found, said, oh, wait a minute, just like we do in the pulp and paper industry, let's go ahead, let's separate that. Why we try to do it with the chip to start with? That's been an improvement. So they've separated the lignin from the fibers, and now they find out they're cooking and able to break it down and create those sugars a lot faster. So that's kind of a layman's term saying, but that's basically what.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for being, any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Charlie, are you in the room? Charlie?
He's in the back.
He's in the back, all right. While he's coming forward. Andres, any final comments before? I've got a couple other folks to recognize, but thank you for hosting today. Thanks for letting us be here in the facility. Anything, Charlie? Any other comments from our office, our staff? Anything you want to announce?
Sir, just thank everybody for coming and let them know that we do have an optional lunch afterwards. I think Jake and Pro Tem say a little bit more about it.
Yep, sounds great. My final thank you will go to these committee members. Thank you for your dedication to this issue, and in the days ahead as we study this and think about what the policy of Georgia will be to help address the issues that we've heard from folks this morning and we're going to hear about in the future days. Thank you. Thank y'all for that, and I hope those that are listening at home, so to speak, and those in the room recognize, Russ, as you mentioned, really the dedication of this Senate committee. We've got folks from all over the state, deep South Georgia, North Georgia, Middle Georgia, and Metro represented, and those viewpoints are going to be brought together in the work of the committee as we go forward. So thank you all for that. Jake Matthews, I will flip it to you to tell us about lunch and any final announcements to close us out.
Yes, we've got lunch for everybody that's here today. I'd ask that everybody, once we're done in here, just move out to the foyer area. That way we can get some tables set up. We'll let the committee and Senate staff go first, and then, again, we took everybody here in the room for doing it. So we'll just come in through the door, right to the kitchen right outside here. You can just filter right back out this door, and again, we'll have this table set up.
Great. Thank you, Jack. With that, thanks for everyone being here, and we are adjourned.